any of your counties that's not using money well?
Mine is using it very well.
Is using money very well.
Noreen is saying, finally, if I come back to you, policy development is the work of national government, not county government. But David, to you first, before we continue to a different issue on the question of IEBC. The two gentlemen in the middle speaking and saying that it is not beneficial to shoot the same person you'd want to be the judge in the race you might be getting into. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. Well, as a student of perhaps political science and democracy, the first thing that we have to understand is that election management is a critical facet of democratic processes, and particularly so for countries in a democratic transition such as ours, where we have constitutional reform activities going on in one way or the other. And so understanding, I think this provides a very good opportunity for IEBC itself to reflect on how it managed the last elections, because particularly its credibility was severely dented. And the first starting point is perhaps two documents. The first is they have their own internal reports, evaluation reports, that actually provide a point for internal reflection on how that process went about. And media report seems to be that they've given themselves a critical evaluation. The second point is the Auditor General's report for last year, which actually has provided the key issues upon which they didn't provide material evidence on their financial statements and expenditures for the last year. And so in my view, even before we take an issue to the referendum, these are conversations that should already be going on, if they are not, so that IEBC begins to reform its image, at least in the members of the public. If the public don't have confidence in it, then with elections being the kind of issues, the kind of activity that it is, heavily polarizing different political party candidates, I think it's only important for them to begin having that conversation in spite of the referendum push to disband them going on. Okay, before I move away from IEBC, so Senator, what you're saying is that IEBC performed poorly in the last year's election. You want them disbanded, you do not have faith in the commission, but you'll trust them for this one last task, which is huge going forward for Kenya, a constitutional change.
We don't trust them, but they are the ones to do the job they have to do. There is what? To supervise elections, to organize and supervise elections. It did, and referenda. And it didn't say that that referenda may not be against them. So they knew when they were swearing that, in fact, we might have to organize a referenda which will send us home. So let them just do their job and do it well, if they can, and go home. And we trust that they will, because I don't think they want to live with a lot of shame in the streets here. You can't even take tea in the Intercontinental Hotel because you bungled elections, because you bungled referenda, because you wanted to protect yourself. Nobody wants to live that kind of life. They are very serious citizens. So let them just do a good job. All right.
Let's come back to you, Barak Muluka, on the Pesa Mashinani public borrowing, one of the other issues you mentioned, as well as equalization funds. Let's finish on that money. First, break it down for us. What are the issues here that you want solved?
Yeah, let's start with the equalization fund, which then can help us to meaningfully understand also and appreciate public borrowing. First, equalization fund is about affirmative action, and it is periodized. After a certain length of time, about 20 years, it's supposed to go away. And it arises out of our flawed development planning and implementation, to the extent that it was done in the past. That following the sessional paper number 10 of 1965 on the so-called African socialism and its application for planning in Kenya, we took a deliberate planning policy position that we would develop only certain parts of the country, and others would hopefully benefit from the development of the trickle off from where the development energy and resources was being injected. Now that has not worked. In fact, that's why we are talking about devolution, and we are talking about pesa mashinani. There are some parts of the country, however, which even with the devolution will take almost forever to try and catch up. So Equalization Fund is about being able to prop them up a little bit and bring them closer to the rest of the country on average. That fund has not begun operating, and when it does begin happening, or if, because it has been clearly demonstrated that somebody is trying to stand in the way of devolution, we would like it to be a county fund, that the Council of Governors should have a say in it, that somebody does not sit outside on the fringes and decide that this is where we are going to take this equalization. We want to have a...
Let me just add something if he's through. Equalization Fund, you know, Kenya has developed along the railway line for the last 50 years. If you check Mombasa, Nairobi, Nakuru, Kisumu, and Eldoret. The rest of this country, just a few kilometers away from the railway line, is another desert, completely forgotten. And that is what this constitution was about to address: equity and redistribution. And it said that we should do something about Wajir, Mandera, Garissa, and all these other places that don't even have an inch of a road, which you can call a road, and water, and things that are necessary for development.
Right.
So we said we create an equalization fund, which fund will be divided amongst those counties that are marginalized. Even the word marginalized is in the constitution. So that they can then put that money where it can lift them. First of all, I think I should urge you, when you do the bill, you should increase it from 0.5% to at least 2%, so that it becomes reasonable. 0.5 is too late.
Remember that.
But more importantly about that equalization fund, it is not supposed to be a national fund. It's supposed to be shared and then sent to that county to then do what it must do to lift itself. You can't then hold it here and dispense it like medicine, or refuse to dispense it like they have now.
They have refused to dispense it.
Yeah. Personally, I wouldn't think that taking that matter to the constitution is the only reason to make them dispense the money. Like I've always argued, most of these issues are more of inefficiencies, which, much as the constitution has already provided, they're not being done.
In this case,
so we should look at this situation from a different angle, not a referendum.
Is there another avenue to resolve?
Let's look for other avenues of addressing some of these issues. Because the question, what is ailing this country, apparently, has nothing to do with the letter of the Constitution. So changing the letter of the Constitution is not in any way a remedy to that problem.
Maybe the same?
I think a preface to this argument actually should be that we have to understand that in the fiscal year 2013-2014, the National Treasury had actually provided an allocation for an equalization fund, and they actually identified, together with the Transition Authority, particular counties which would qualify or require an equalization fund. And the purpose was to basically try and equalize the base, understanding that the economic endowments and the revenue-raising capacities for counties were different. And this was done through a process that involved consultation with the Commission for Revenue Allocation. So finally, when it came to Parliament interfaced with it, resulting in the final budget for 2013-2014. But for the current fiscal year, which is the financial year 2014-2015,
yes.
There hasn't been a provision for it. And maybe the questions we need to start asking is, why was it omitted?
So is this an issue, in your opinion, that can only be resolved through a referendum?
I think there's one thing that we need to note. Yeah. There seems to be a breakdown of communication between these two levels of government. That perhaps in the view of the referendum proponents, that is the only way they can achieve the kind of reform that they want. So for me, looking at that relationship, if I were a social therapist, I would say they need to communicate better.
It's good you say that, because it appears the Okoa Kenya referendum push was born out of government refusing to come down or jubilee for that what do you call dialogue that you were calling for before. And for this Council of Governors, you talked about the summit not working. So it is trying to resolve these issues with the government that they're not apparently listening, and then you decide, okay, you're not listening, we have something bigger coming your way. Is it that breakdown in the relationship that is bringing all this out? You want to say something, Colonel, before I come to you?
Yeah. Before the event on the communication, I think it is important for us to consider the proposal that they are making and ask ourselves whether we require a referendum or not. The first thing that we have to realize is that through the PFM Act, the National Treasury, in consultation with the Commission for Revenue Allocation, together with Parliament, are the ones who have interest and even ability and power to change allocation wherever they may be with regards to the Equalization Fund. And this proposal now is saying that we need to change that. We need to bring in governance, and maybe there's merit in that. I think what we are not hearing is the justification for governors to be involved in this, and the kind of value addition that would bring.
Okay, so gentlemen, I saw you both nod when I said that it's because government was not listening, and so that's why you're moving to a referendum. So then are you in essence saying there are in fact other avenues to deal with all these issues you're raising, but because the government is not listening to you, you want to teach them a lesson through a referendum?
No, it's not a teaching them a lesson. It is an instrument of last resort.
Okay.
We asked for dialogue, and we had these issues. We wrote to the president. He said, I think he rubbished it. We talked about it. I think the deputy president said, we are too busy, we are not going to talk to noisemakers. And we said, we are not making noise. We are raising very serious issues here that concern the nation and the government and how they feel they're being governed. And they told us to go to hell. So we are going to hell. and this is the only thing. And now I hear them talk of dialogue. I've heard.
They're forming, I think,
I don't know. They are trying one at the Senate and at the National Assembly. I had the deputy president talk of dialogue. I had the president say we should sit down and talk.
So if they call for it, you'll not agree?
If they resolve these issues, and in fact, it would be very cheap for us to go to an uncontested referendum, because there are certain matters that can only be done through a referendum. Okay. If we have to fix the IEBC, we must go through a referendum.
You see, for a start, I've always had a problem with the way my friends here asked for that dialogue. The position remains the same, that they were asking for that dialogue menacingly.
Threatening if you don't.
And they were even saying things like, we are going to shave you.
Do not worry.
Which I think is not the way to ask for dialogue. It's the way to make sure that dialogue does not happen. Okay? And therefore I want to give President Kenyatta and the Deputy and the Jubilee the benefit of doubt to that extent. But then after I have given them that benefit of doubt, I come back to where I sit. And I say we have got the Intergovernmental Relations Act, and it creates structures and forums for dialogue and negotiation. And that in fact those forums have had several sessions, that these issues we raise have been pointed out, and the president himself chairs the summit. And he has said that yes, we are going to deal with these things, they are legitimate. But when that session is over, nothing happens. 1 year later, that there is the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council, which is chaired by the Deputy President. It has met several times. These issues have been raised. When we are inside there, they accept. They say, yes, these things are legitimate. When we leave that place and they come out to play to the public gallery, they put on a different coat.
You're taking matters into your own hands.
We are not taking matters into our own hands. We want to move. And we are not going to stay in this law of despond forever, wallowing there and saying to each other things that are not moving. And people who are holding our funds, which should be in the counties, telling us, in fact, when we even say things like the national government should give, the national government does not have that money to give. It doesn't have the mandate to give us that money. The mandate rests with the Commission for Revenue Allocation, which is an independent body that is created by the Constitution. At what point is it even that somebody is saying that we will not give you? You will not give us as who? In this particular regard. All
right, let's move away from that to, finally to land reforms.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
Faster. Sophia, personally, I usually think that in this country, the biggest problem we have is that, one, there could be there are always those cases of an unresponsive government on one side, and then there's the other side of the opposition always trying to ensure that for it to maintain relevance, it needs to put the country in a constant political mode. In which case, in most cases, we seem to end up for 5 years always politicking.
So for you, this is pure politics, seeking relevance?
Yeah, we stop being objective. And the advantage that in most cases our politicians get is that there is always a critical mass, of course drawn from on tribal lines, that whatever angle you take, even if you say, guys, let's go and take all the petrol in the petrol stations and pour around this country and put it on fire, they say, oh yes, let's go and do it. So the problem is that once we do that, we stop being objective. We stop asking ourselves taking any alternative means, especially if those alternative means will mean that we do not then have an active kind of role and we don't have the country polarized all the time. And you realize that all the time, it keeps dragging us back. It keeps slowing us down. That yes, I agree that the government should, on one side, also have some level of respect in terms of being responsive to some the concerns that are being raised and all that. Yes. Then on the other end, then we should also not now start taking advantage of that situation to only say now, let's keep polarizing.
All right, let's go to land reforms very quickly. Senator, for Okoa Kenya, the issue on land reforms and clarifying the question of mandate, which has been one that we've seen a lot of debate and arguments between the NLC and the CS, is before the Supreme Court. So why, again, what is it exactly you're trying to resolve in this? Because the NLC already has numerous powers in it and mandate to be able to adjudicate and deal with a number of these issues.
What we are trying to resolve is so that they don't go to the Supreme Court at all.
They're already before the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so that they don't go there again. Sooner or later they will be there.
Okay.
We want to clarify the issues. Whose responsibility is this? Let me tell you. What annoyed Kenyans most is something called a grabbing. It has never been defined in law. But this thing called a grabbing, including grabbing of public utility land and so on, annoyed Kenyans so much. By the time we were in Bomas, that was the thing that annoyed people most on the land question. And it was, the law then said that if you want some public land to do whatever you want to do, you apply to the president. And if the president says yes, then the commissioner gives you the land on the signature of the president. In fact, it is on the signature of the commission. Most of the grants, these are lawyers, know that it is said, I, the president, grants to so and so.
But that is already changed in the Constitution.
Yeah, now it is changed. But we wanted to make sure that land issues are removed from the politicians, beginning with the president.
Are they not already?
Look at what is going on. The commission was given all that responsibility. Somehow we left something behind. We said, oh, the titles can be given by the cabinet or the government, but only on recommendation of the
NLC.
Yes. Now that is the issue. The cabinet secretary is saying, I am giving title deeds. And these guys are saying, no, we have not advised you. These other guys are saying, you have not given us money to run our new docket.
Muluka is another issue that we're going to hear the Supreme Court clarify.
The issue here is that somebody somewhere does not want the matters of public land to be streamlined because it can hurt some politicians.
Muluka,
that's the one.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think the question of land is there. It's in the open. Everybody can see that we inscribed it into the Constitution, and it's one of the most clear and elaborate chapters in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. But we have seen people overstepping their powers and interfering, and in fact, like devolution, trying to make sure that the National Land Commission...
But is this an issue worth going to a referendum for? When, in terms of clarifying
all these things that
mandate
we are
questions?
talking about, if we had a government that was responsive, and I think that the first duty of any government is to listen to the citizens, to have conversation with the citizens. If we had a government, national government, that was listening and willing to engage in conversation with the citizens, none of these matters would be arising today, people saying, let us go to a referendum. But when you have a government that says, oh, these are the people whom we defeated, we cannot talk to them, and then they start even saying that even these governors, they are now working with the people whom we defeated, it cannot be done that way.
It cannot be done that way. Sudi?
Without respect to the structures, to the constitutionally created structures and the constitutionally created institutions in this country, by whichever side, we are not moving anywhere. Because the question that comes is that having said that the Constitution is very clear on land issues, yet the same is not being adhered to, is going to the referendum and amending it going to be the solution? That's the biggest question we should ask ourselves. Are we then engaging in a mere effort in futility? That at the end of the day, what we are having in this country is lack of respect. The structures. That Senator here is a lawyer, and he knows very well, a very senior one. I respect him a lot, and he knows very well that in law, the courts, and now we have the Supreme Court. The courts are also very critical instruments of lawmaking. That if a matter goes before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gives direction, then the same should be respected. And it becomes well...
That is the only place where you're wrong. Courts don't make law. Courts interpret the law.
And this is what they're coming in to do in this particular...
Let's get it very clear. When they interpret that law and put everything clear, then the issue has been dealt with. However, the problem comes when, one, even the court itself does not respect the same Supreme Court.
Who says so?
It does not have to wait. We're saying the matter is before the Supreme Court. They're saying no. I know, of course, court has its issues with the Supreme Court. I understand that. Definitely they don't...
Now you're playing politics.
We're good friends. But let me finish. Let me just finish. That the point that I'm trying to drive at is that at the end of the day, you realize that the real problem in this country has nothing to do with the law. And therefore, the real solution to this country is nothing to do with the referendum.
David.
Thank you. I think that last statement actually is quite unfactual, and there is evidence contrary to that. If you look at the argument or the objective of achieving independence in land allocating institutions, which is actually the National Land Commission for our case, the central argument of achieving independence away from the executive is so that the executive has less influence over land allocations, distribution, and management of land affairs. And this is the case because if you come to developing nations such as Kenya, the largest proportions in terms of the statutory statutory status of land, the largest proportion is actually public land. And public land is where most of the corruption has actually come from. If you look at the illegal demarcations that have happened in the past, for instance, are actually on public land. So because that is the case, in order to reduce the influence of the executive on such cases, it has been argued for, and there's a lot of evidence, even in Kenya, for achieving or having an independent land allocating institution, which the Constitution managed to achieve. Now, the issue now is, much as we have now a political contestation, the impact of that has been quite severe, because if you look at land holdings in Kenya, particularly for the rural area, non-public land holdings are becoming smaller and smaller by the day. And that has been shown to have quite adverse effects on food security as well as livelihoods, even for women in rural areas. And there's evidence to show this. And the main thing, therefore, is that much as the land reform that we undertook, and that oversight has been cited by the Honorable Senator, is actually quite a big issue, because in the manner in which the Land Acts were passed, remember they brought them all together, passed them in a hurry in order to beat the constitutional deadlines that had in place. And therefore one issue that was overseen has now gotten us into a wrangle and a contestation of issues regarding the functions of the National Land Commission. Right. But I think the thing that we should not, that I should emphasize, is that it is important for us to have an independent land allocating institution, because it has been shown and proven that when we have an independent land allocating institution, we actually are enhancing food security and even livelihoods for rural people living in rural areas. Okay,
our time is up, but Senator Muluka, it appears on the issues that you both brought out, or your camps are pushing for, you agree on pretty much all of them except IEBC, where you're on opposite sides. So then is it fair to say that perhaps you should be considering having one combined push? Are you considering?
Oh, well, it will not be politically prudent for my brother to come along with us.
Why?
Because I think on the IEBC, yes, the other side is taking a very strong stand that it should not happen. And I think it is also hurting them, because you do not, this is an independent institution. We should not be directed by anybody. And when you become too much friendly to it, as to defend it against others who say we doubt its credibility, we doubt whether you are not defending them because they gave you a penalty in the last game.
So you're saying all right, so there's no way you're going to work with them.
You see, Senator here,
yes.
The Honorable Senator is here, and we recognize him as the Senator, because the IEBC validated his election.
And mine was a small matter.
All right.
And the concerns here are about the practicality of the whole proposal.
Yeah.
Really, that you are saying that we don't trust you, but we want to trust you just this one last time, so that you preside over this thing again.
No, we don't trust them.
It is not making sense. Now, about coming together and collapsing these things into one, I don't think that is our concern. Our concern and focus remain the issues that we are raising. We don't even know who else is going to come up tomorrow with their own issues. It's up to the IEBC at its own level. If they determine that these things could actually be crafted into one bill, then they will need to seek to consult.
In fact, let me just help with one statement. I think eventually it will come to a bill or bills. And if we agree, it seems, the bill will say one thing. So you cannot have two bills saying the same thing going to the referendum. So eventually we might have one bill, or because we are not quite agreeing on this IEBC, maybe two bills. One talking about the IEBC and another talking about everything else.
All right. How about Senator Otieno Kajwang, Barack Muluka, Council of Governors spokesperson, Sudi Wanda Mbusi, who's lawyer, and David Owero, Program Officer, IEA, which is Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you all for joining us this morning. That was a good conversation. At least we've run through most of the issues, not all of them, but a better perspective, we hope, for our viewers, and understanding of what it is both camps are calling calling for, pushing for, advocating for. And I come out from this hearing that the government is not listening, so you have decided to move on this. If they listen, maybe you will.
Yes.
We'll see.
Yes.
We'll continue to watch those events as they